Hi, I'm Jenny Kanoki, and this is my Module 8 case study over Get This Child Out of My Room. Summary of the case: Carl Hughes is a third grade student in Mrs. Taylor's classroom. His parents have recently gotten a bitter divorce, and that has led to his behavior escalating. Susan Green has recently graduated from college, and she has taken the special education position at Schuyler Schools. She is replacing a 25-year veteran teacher, Mrs. Lewis. What do I know? So, as I stated, Carl's behavior has changed. He used to just be self-abusing, and now it has turned into also threatening others. Carl's mom recently got a job where she now works 50 hours a week and doesn't have as much time at home. Mrs. Taylor is feeling really overwhelmed, and she wants Carl to be pulled out of the classroom. She has stated that Mrs. Lewis would pull kids out and put them in the detention room and give them a workbook. Susan has evaluated Carl's IEP and his behavior management plan, and she does not feel that that is what the resource room should be used for. She wants Carl to be in the classroom and meet his behavior management plan. The school superintendent and the special education coordinator of the district agreed that Mrs. Susan, she could ask for a reevaluation of Carl's behavior management plan. What do I need to know? So there were two main things that really popped out when I was reading this case study. I wondered, are the outbursts only happening in Mrs. Taylor's room, or are they happening in other places of the school? How is Carl in PE, in the cafeteria, out at recess? Is he fine in those situations, or do the outbursts also happen in those situations? I also wondered, how much does Carl get to see his dad now? Does he have a close connection with a grandpa, an uncle, or a coach? Because I wondered, is he just feeling like he has a lack of a male figure in his life right now? Maybe he needs that male role model. I wondered if he was a part of any clubs or teams. Sometimes for kids, when they're misbehaving, being a part of a team, just feeling like they can contribute to something in a successful way, something that they feel like they can actually control, helps with their behavior. I also wondered, can the school help mom feel more supported at home by helping her create a behavior management plan for home? Finally, the last thing that I wondered was, has anyone sat down and talked to Carl, such as a school therapist, asking him how he feels about his life recently, just letting him vent about what's been going on? What is the problem? So the main problem is that Carl's behavior has changed drastically, and that Mrs. Taylor wants Carl out of her classroom. His IEP team needs to work together. Right now, it has been Susan who has done most of the foundational work by herself instead of the team collaborating together. The school is used to the way Mrs. Lewis did things by just pulling students out and putting them in the resource room for the rest of the day. And so I feel like the school needs to have a training to show them what inclusion is and how the resource room should be properly used. Step 1. Susan needs to meet with other personnel in the school to gather information on Carl, such as the PE teacher, the cafeteria staff, who supervises recess, and see how Carl is in those situations. After Susan has observed and collected data and spoken with Mrs. Taylor, they need to sit down and come up with a behavior management plan for Carl so that he can feel more supported. Susan should also propose a reevaluation of Carl's IEP. And then I really believe that somebody needs to talk with Carl. If a school therapist is not available, find somebody that he can connect with, a male teacher or the PE teacher, anybody. Maybe it's Miss Susan that he will connect with. Anybody that he can just talk to instead of being told what to do or always talking about his behavior management plan, just somebody to talk and make a connection with. Step 2. So after the observations and conversations and collecting of the data has happened, the plan of action needs to be for changes and goals in the behavior management plan to be installed. Mrs. Taylor I think instead of just labeling her as a bad teacher and saying, she doesn't care about her students, she just wants them out of her classroom, I imagine she's probably feeling really overwhelmed herself. She has a student that is challenging her, and she is used to the way Mrs. Lewis did things. And so I think it would really benefit the relationship between Susan and Mrs. Taylor if Susan would ask Mrs. Taylor what can be done for her to feel supported when Carl is in the classroom. And then Susan needs to reach out to the superintendent and the special education coordinator to see if there's anything else that they can do at home to provide resources for Carl's mom. Step 3, Susan needs to meet with her superintendent and special education coordinator to express her concerns about Skylar's correct use of the resource room. I think that a staff training would be beneficial to show them, to go over things such as inclusion, student rights, parent rights, and to make sure that the school is following the state and federal regulations. And then somebody needs to regularly be following up with Mrs. Taylor, Carl, and his mom to see how things are going. Susan could do some of those things, but I think somebody also needs to be checking in on Susan, such as the superintendent or the special education coordinator, just to see how the situation is evolving and progressing. Promoting the success of all students. So category 3, resolve the issues. So the school and personnel need to make sure that they are following the rules and regulations. And that really needs to come from an administrative standpoint. The superintendent and the special education coordinator, they need to make sure that the schools that they are in charge of are following the state laws and regulations. Carl needs his behavior management plan to be evaluated and changed. He needs different goals or rewards, something that will give him an incentive to follow his behavior management plan. And then I also believe that support outlets need to be provided for Carl so that he can just talk and not feel like he's just all in, he's doing this all on his own, and that he doesn't have anybody to talk to. What was I thinking and feeling and valuing during this problem? So the first thing is I really admire Susan for not giving in to the veteran teachers. She's right out of college. This is her first experience with special education, and she has people telling her that this is not how we have done things. So I really commend her for sticking to what she knows is right and not just going with the way we've always done things. I think that Mrs. Taylor is probably a really good teacher, and she herself is just feeling overwhelmed. She has a student that's challenging her, and she doesn't have Mrs. Lewis. She has somebody new who is doing things different than what she is used to doing. Susan, I'm guessing, is most likely feeling really alone. She doesn't have a lot of support. She worked on the IEP foundation by herself. And so I think she's feeling like she doesn't have a lot of support or collaborative relationships in the school. I believe that all of the adults in this situation are just feeling really overwhelmed. Carl's parents, Mrs. Taylor, the superintendent, the special education coordinator, Susan, whether they're in new jobs or new roles in life or they have a lot to oversee, there's just a lot of changes going on for the adults in the situation, and I think they're all just feeling really overwhelmed. It's not that they're necessarily all trying to fail or that they just don't care. I think that they're just getting wrapped up in their problems, and they're stopping to forget and take a breath and make sure that the kids in the situation are also doing okay. What issues are still unresolved? So I am wondering, how will, the changes to Carl's behavior plan, will they work? Will they be successful? If not, will the team come together to collaborate and evaluate his plan further? Is Mrs. Taylor willing to be open-minded? Is she even open to the idea, not the idea, but the rule of inclusion? Or are they going to need to have the superintendent step in and help administer how things are going to work with Mrs. Taylor? Does the staff go through with training? Do they get, a training on how inclusion works, IEPs, how the resource room is now going to be ran at Skylar? Do the resources and management plan help at home with Carl's mom? Is there less tension between Carl and his mom? And is Carl just overall feeling more successful in his life? Category 5, Component 1. So promote the academic success of every student. IEP teams need to work together. It should not be just a special education teacher working by themselves to come up with an IEP plan. It needs to be a team. Inclusion and the least restrictive environment needs to be followed. Not only is it what's best for the student, emotionally, physically, spiritually, everything, but it's also a state and federal law. And then teachers and staff need to collaborate with each other. Everybody can have a different relationship with a student. And so when it comes to making decisions for a student, teachers and staff need to collaborate and work together. Component 2, promote the personal well-being of every student. Support staff needs to be present when helping a student de-escalate. Like I just stated, we all have different relationships. We need to find that person when a student is acting out. We need to find that person that could talk to that student and help them de-escalate. Regular communication between administration, staff members, and parents. Students who are on an IEP, their parents have parental rights, and so they deserve to know what's going on in the situation and be kept in the loop. Administration also needs to be checking in with teachers and staff to not just make sure that rules and regulations are being followed, but also that everybody feels supported and accommodated for. And then everybody needs to work collaboratively together on student behavior plans. Component 3, enhance instructional capacity. So there needs to be staff trainings that happen regularly to keep people involved on what is evolving and changing, especially when it comes to the special education world. And there needs to be examples for how to collaborate with each other, how to talk to each other when there is a problem, and just give them little projects that they can work on collaborating. Add staff members if that is an option. Add paras. They did not mention if Carl had a para in his room, if there was somebody that he could connect with, if he would feel more supported and have less outbursts if there was a para there in the classroom with him. And then administration needs to conduct something like walkthroughs, some type of evaluation that they can monitor if students and staff are doing their jobs correctly and they are progressing. So that is all I have in my case study. Thank you for watching.